Is the Republican National Convention about to get hijacked by Ron Paul? I'm Steve Green. This is Trifecta, and here to answer that question and more, of course, Scott Ott and Bill Whittle. Gentlemen, at the Washington Post, Rachel Weiner, I'm not sure which, reports that Ron Paul won a majority of Nevada's delegates over the weekend, even though Mitt Romney won the caucus vote when that was held a couple of months back, and he won it by a big margin. Paul did it by rallying his supporters to, in effect, hijack the delegate selection process. Scott, is this fair or foul?
It's absolutely fair. He didn't hijack the delegate selection process. He went according to the delegate selection process. He just happens to be one of those guys who understands how the system really works. And as you know, anybody who watches Trifecta knows that I'm not some sort of raving Ron Paul fan, but I think that it's only fair that if you're going to have a system that has rules, that somebody who plays by the rules gets the delegates. That's how it works.
And you know, it was that same kind of ability to read the ground game that got Barack Obama the nomination in 2008. I'm with Scott on this one. Bill, things are even uglier in Idaho. Romney captured all 32 delegates in that state's caucus, but Paul's supporters are threatening, and this is their term, scorched earth tactics to control the slate of delegates that actually go to Tampa. Bill, are Paul's supporters trying to undo the will of the people in Idaho?
No, I agree with Scotty. I mean, if these are legal parliamentary maneuvers, they have every right to employ them. And frankly, I think it does Mitt Romney an awful lot of good and the Republican Party an awful lot of good to have this libertarian base just constantly nipping at their heels and reminding them that this is not a coronation and that this is not an indication that we support this most, I'll be generous and say moderate candidate that emerged from the entire field. You know, the RNC and the American people, you know what, let me just back up, because everybody has been saying that Romney was appointed by, you know, the powers that be and that, you know, it was forced on us by a blood. No, Mitt Romney won elections. I mean, he won primary elections. There's no way you can say that he was fiated into the candidacy, but you certainly can say that he is a very liberal conservative. And I think it's extraordinarily good for the party and extraordinarily good for the campaign to have Ron Paul, who understands these constitutional issues better than anyone, constantly applying pressure and keeping nipping at the heels there and making sure Romney doesn't just glide into this sort of moderate, you know, thing.
Indeed. You know, the same thing is going on in Maine, another caucus state where Romney won big, but Paul's people will end up controlling the delegates. And GOP strategist Mike Dennehy, he warned that Romney ought to tread lightly because Paul's supporters are the most, and this is his phrase, the most passionate and frustrated in the GOP electorate, and they also include a lot of independents. So, Scott, should Romney take this kind of thing lying down?
No, I don't think you should take it lying down. I think you should take it sitting down. I think you should sit down and listen to these people. I think you should find out what it is that motivates them and why they're so passionate, and maybe adopt some of their zeal for his own campaign, but at the very least, adopt some of their solid conservative positions for his platform. If the Republican National Convention is going to be anything other than just a coronation, it should be for a legitimate hammering out of the platform among a people with diverse ideas who come together and agree on something. Let's have a real convention instead of this show that we put on every 4 years.
Well, if you want a coronation, go to Charlotte this summer. Well, re-coronation. Finally, at the Christian Science Monitor, Peter Greer says that Paul's maneuvers really do matter because he could throw the Tampa convention floor into, and I quote, embarrassing disarray. Bill, embarrassing disarray. Does it matter?
What an absurd thing to say, and what an ahistorical thing to say. As Scotty mentioned, conventions are supposed to be where you hammer this stuff out. The history of political conventions, really up until I guess it was right around the Nixon, Kennedy, somewhere in there, did these things start to become coronations and the invention of the modern primary system, all this stuff. The convention is supposed to be chaotic and disarrayed. It's supposed to be these things. This is the sound of actual democracy, unlike these people out in the streets throwing bricks through store windows and saying, this is what democracy looks like. This is what a mob looks like. When you have actual delegates on a floor of a convention, legally there, behaving according to the rules of the convention, then that's the purpose of all this. And I think that Romney, I agree with Scotty 100%. I think it would be good for Romney, good for the party, if Romney could make some sort of serious gesture or commitment to the Ron Paul people. Because frankly, this election, especially among young people, Ron Paul's enthusiasm is support is much higher than Barack Obama's. If you throw that army away, if you just throw it away, then you have made an enormous tactical mistake, and I don't think we can afford to make any this November.
No, not this November. And you know what? If you want a peace offering from Mitt Romney, how about Vice President Rand Paul? You know what, folks? This was actually a tough one for me to figure out exactly where I stood. Because even though I agree with them on most issues, Ron Paul supporters can be a real pain. You know you can be. And a lot more likely sometimes to alienate would-be allies than they are to gain new friends. But you know what? For the next 5 months and maybe as long as the next 8 years, we're going to have to put up with Mitt Romney. And that means holding his feet to the fire, and it means keeping that fire hot. So Ron Paul people, you keep up the good work, and I'll see you in Tampa. For PJTV, I'm Steve Green.